Hello and welcome to this session in which we will discuss information technology or IT general controls. We're still within the context of internal control. Part of the internal control is our information system or information technology. Information technology is designed to manage risk associated with technology. Because as we use information technology to run the business, to run processes, we need to have certain controls to protect our assets, protect the information, protect the databases that we are using to run our business. There are two main categories of IT controls. One are called the general controls, and one is called application controls. In this session, we would look at general controls. And general controls pertain to the broader aspects of the IT function. We're looking at the overall picture and we're trying to protect the big picture, ensuring the consistent operation and integrity of the system. And let me give you a picture to differentiate between what we mean by general controls and application controls. In this session, we'll focus on general controls. Think this is our information system, which will have various accounting and business applications such as cash application, sales application, payroll application, manufacturing application, inventory application. So these are specific applications within the system. Then here comes the general controls. General controls is that rectangular, red rectangular that protect the whole system. Protect the whole system from unauthorized access, protect the system from unauthorized processing, protect the system from system crash, the whole system crashing altogether, risk of unauthorized changes. It doesn't matter how well your applications are protected. If the system itself is not protected, we have a problem. And the general controls are the controls that protect the whole system. So let's go ahead and take a look at specific steps when it comes to general controls. What is general controls composed of? Before we proceed any further, I have a public announcement about my company, farhatlectures.com. Farhat Accounting Lectures is a supplemental educational tool that's going to help you with your CPA exam preparation as well as your accounting courses. My CPA material is aligned with your CPA review course such as Becker, Roger, Wiley, Gleam, Miles. My accounting courses are aligned with your accounting courses broken down by chapter and topics. My resources consist of lectures, multiple choice questions, true-false questions, as well as exercises. Go ahead, start your free trial today. There are 6 elements in the general controls, addressing the overall aspect of the IT function prior to the processing of transaction. Remember, when we process the transaction within an application. Here we are looking at controls outside those applications. And they can be divided into 6 primary categories. 1 is administration of IT functions, 2, division of IT responsibilities, 3, system development, 4, physical and digital security, 5, backup and contingency planning, and 6, hardware controls. If you know anything about Farhat Lectures, once I have a list of items, I'm going to go over each list separately, starting with administration of IT function, which is one of 6 general controls. Administration of the IT function, think of it as the control environment of the IT. What is the control environment? It's the entity level controls of the IT. Think of the attitude of the board of director and senior management when it comes to the control environment when we discussed internal control. But here we're looking at their attitude toward the IT, toward information technology, to determine the perceived value within the organization when it comes to IT. Now, how can we measure the attitude of the board of directors and senior management? Well, we're going to take a look at how seriously they took their oversight over information technology. Do they take it seriously or not? How about funding decision? Do they budget large amount of money or sufficient amount of money to the IT department so they can do their job, or do they not? Do they give them a small amount of money where they don't have enough resources? How about their involvement in IT matters? Are they involved, or do they just don't ignore that part of the business? Well, these are signals, indication of how well they take IT function. Now, in larger organization, in larger setting, what they do as the board of committee, they create what's called IT steering committees to oversee technology needs. So simply put, within the board of directors, they create its own IT steering committee. And this gives a signal that the company is taking information technology very seriously. When I work in college, we had IT steering committees, and what we do is before we undertake an IT project, they study it, they look at cost benefit, and they allocate the resources to that project. In simpler setup, in simpler company, the board might depend on update from the chief information officer or from senior IT personnel. Sometimes you may not have enough resources to have an IT steering committee, but you'll have a CIO and senior IT personnel. Regardless, relegating IT tasks solely to junior staff or external consultants suggests a lower priority for IT. It doesn't mean that junior staff are not capable, or entry-level individuals or external consultant, but basically what you're doing is you're giving lower priority to IT. And especially if you are not funding them. Also lower staff, junior staff, they don't have the authority to make decisions. Simply put, the administration of the IT function is the overall picture, the overall attitude of the general controls. And if this is bad, the rest will basically follow. If the senior management, the board of directors are not taking IT general controls seriously, then the rest of the company would follow. The second element of IT general controls is segregation of duties. On this slide, I'm going to show you the big picture, and literally it's going to look like a picture about the various different roles and departments within the general IT. On the top, we have the Chief Information Officer or the IT Manager, and on the subsequent slide, I would look at each role separately, defining each role. This is just the overall picture. Next to this individual or to this group, we have Security Administrator. As the word Security Administrator implies, they are in charge of physical as well as digital and cybersecurity and logical security. Then we're going to separate the IT department into three separate categories. The first one are the system developments. Under the system developments, we are going to have the system analyst, and the system analysts are the people that basically map the system. Basically, they're the architect. They're the individuals that take the business information and draw it into an information system plan. Then after they draft the picture, we need programmers that's going to write the code to execute what they wrote. So this is the system development, and those should be separate from other departments. Simply put, this is the first section where we have the system development. The second group of people should be the operation. The operation are the people that are actually using the system. Now we have the librarian under the operation. Sometimes we could have the librarian under the system development. The librarians are the people that keep track of the programs and don't let anyone touch them without proper authority. Then we have under the operation, we could have network administrators. Again, as the word suggests, they are in charge of the network that it's used by the whole system, by the whole company. Then we have the computer operators. The computer operators are the people that use the system. They are the operators themselves. Also, this group operation should be separate from system development. Then we have the third group. We can call them data control, or simply put, database management. And this is the people who are in charge of the database. And they would have groups such as data input output control. They control the input and the output in the database, make sure everything that's going in is proper and everything that's being spit out is proper as well. And we would have also database administrator. And that's the third group that should be separate. And think of when we talked about the ARC, the ARC means authorization, recording, and custody of asset. Basically, these are the authorization people. A is the system development, they authorize the system. Authorization, recording is the people happening by the operation, and the custody of the asset, the custody of the data is with the database administrator. Authorization 1, recording 2, the operation people, custody, the database administrator 3rd. Now I'm going to go over each of these sections separately, just explain a little bit more their role, but this is literally the big picture. Let's look at the details. Okay, to counteract the risk of computers consolidating traditional roles, well-managed organizations segregate critical IT duties, which I showed you on the previous slide. This ensures that IT staff cannot authorize and lock transaction to misappropriate assets. Simply put, you cannot authorize the transaction and be able to record the transaction. As we said, the Chief Information Officer should oversee the IT function aligning activities with a strategic plan. So this is the person on the top. Then we'll have next to them a security administrator, should supervise both physical and digital access to resources, probing any security breaches. Now we're going to look at what type of techniques they use on the next few slides, the security administrator. Then we have the operation. Computer operators manage daily computer tasks adhering to the CEO's schedule and monitor for system issues. A librarian controls access to computer records, only granting operator access as scheduled. So basically, again, as we said, the librarian could be put with the system analyst, could be separate, depending on the company. Then we have the programmers. Those, they can access test software copies only with senior management approval, because you don't want the programmers to be accessing live software because they can make changes to their own benefit. Network administrator oversees the server's network, ensuring smooth connection between users, application, and data files. So the network is important because it connects everything together. Then we have the data control, basically the database administrator. They validate the input and output quality, make sure everything is reasonable, makes sense. Organizations often use databases for shared information storage, with database administrator overseeing their operation and ensuring access security. Because we could have many departments, but we could have one database that's serving all these departments. Let's talk a little bit more about system development, because that's one section of the IT segregation of duties, but let's talk about system development. Then we're going to have few sessions specifically for system development. This lesson is for if you're taking an audit course in college, but if you're studying for the CPA exam, system development, you will have to spend 2 to 3 hours with lectures about system development. I have it separate, but this is the big picture. System analysts handle, as I mentioned, the design of the application system, coordinating IT development, acquisition when we buy a new system, and changes with both IT programmers and main system users like account receivable staff. Now, the programmers within the system development design flowchart, draft computer instruction, test application, and documents outcome. Now, for security reasons, programmers should not access input data or operational functions. As I told you, programmers should be separate from the other groups. Why? Because they can create something in the program to benefit themselves. A case in point, whether you want to call it fictional or a movie, is a programmer in a bank. What they did, they rounded each account to a penny, and they send that penny to their account. And think about, there are millions and millions of accounts in the bank, and if each account send a penny to that individual account, then they can be rich easily without any work by stealing money from the customers. Their work should be limited to test versions of the programs and data, ensuring software alteration only after receiving proper authorization. So they cannot just change the program. There should be a program changes policies, and we'll talk about those in a separate recording. Just this is the overall picture, as I mentioned. When it comes to system development, you might have to introduce a new system, basically either whether you bought or you develop it. There are two methods to introduce the new system. You could either use the pilot testing, where the new system is introduced in a segment of the organization. You might have 4 or 5 different segments or different division. You will use the new system in one segment, wait to see how it goes. If all goes well, then you will go ahead and use it in the old system while you're using the old system in the other segments. Or you could use the parallel testing, where what you will do is you implement the new and the old at the same time. Both old and new system run concurrently at the same time across all locations, and hopefully if the new system is working well, it should give us the same output as the old system. If it's giving us the same output, it means the system is working properly. You want to make sure that all new updates must be thoroughly documented, and after successful testing and documentation, the software is handed over to the librarian in a controlled way to ensure only approved versions are authorized. As part of the general IT controls, we should have physical and digital security. Physical and online restriction reduce the risk of unauthorized program modification and misuse of programs and data. And here we introduce the concept of cybersecurity. It's the measures the organization adopt to guard computers, network, and data against unauthorized access. Again, when we talk about cybersecurities, for CPA exam, you have 7. I have 7 lectures about cybersecurities, the proper way to protect your asset. Again, this is only an audit course. Written and monitored security plan are essential, encompassing both physical and online access. You have to have written plan. Why? In case you are sued, you want to show that you made a good faith effort to protect your asset. Okay, you have to monitor your security plans. Let's talk a little bit more about physical securities. What are some good examples? Well, restricting access to the computer hardware, software, and backup. Physically restricting that access. Having doors, having fences, so on and so forth. Typical measure include keypads, batch system, cameras, security staff. Advanced control might involve fingerprint or retina scans matched against an approved database, so only people who are required to access this area can access it. Other measures would include climate monitoring for equipment health and fire extinguishing setup to minimize the fire damage. So this is all part of the physical. Then we have digital security. Digital security would involve user IDs, password, two-factor safeguard software and data access, mitigation of unauthorized modification. We could have firewalls, encryption to further enhance system protection. Again, digital security will be covered much more in details in separate recording about digital security. We could also have a backup and contingency planning. Again, this is a major topic on the CPA exam, and this session will only cover it in one slide. Disruption like outage, fire, sabotage can severely impact the IT-reliant businesses. Therefore, they have to have a backup planning in case something happens. Many companies might use battery backup or generation for power issues, but for major disaster, they should have a backup strategies including off-site storage or specialized data storage firms. And here we talk about hot site and cold site in the backup and contingency planning lessons. These plans should pinpoint alternative hardware for data processing. Small firms might buy emergency replacement computers using backup and software and data. Larger firms often partner with IT centers for off-site resources and services in case of an IT crisis. A case in point is the 9/11 attack, the terrorist attack of September 11 of 2001. The New York Stock Exchange, because it was very close to the attack site, what they did, they moved to another location, and that location was ready to go on a moment notice. Those are called hot site. That's this way, if something happened in one site, you can be up and running the following day. Now, there are various types of sites. There's hot sites, cold sites, and something in between, warm sites. We'll talk about those in the backup and contingency planning lectures. Hardware controls, these are controls built into computer equipment by manufacturers to detect and report equipment failure. Think of the Xerox machine. If something happened to the Xerox machine, if there's something wrong with it, it will give you an error. It will show you on the screens like some sort of an error. Now, what's the involvement of the auditor with these errors? The manufacturers integrate those hardware control into the equipment to spot any failure. The auditor's job is to focus on the client's response to these errors, then the control's efficiency. You are not really testing the equipment itself. You are looking at how does the client means the auditee, the company that you're auditing, how do they manage those errors? Do they have people following up to make sure the equipment is running properly? For example, do they have, for example, an 800 number next to this error to call the manufacturers to send someone to fix it? Why do they do that? Because no matter how robust the controls, effective errors handling is crucial for accurate output. If they don't follow up on the error to make sure the system is working properly, then we still have an issue. Let's take a look at this multiple choice from Farhat lectures in order to test our knowledge about IT general controls. Who's usually responsible for controlling the use of computer programs, transaction files, and other computer records and documentation, and releasing them to the operators only when authorized? Well, let's take a look at our answer choices, and one of them is correct, and the other ones are incorrect. Now let's take a look and basically look at eliminate the easy answers out first. Let's look at A, the data control operator. Well, for one thing, they are operator. And operators, they get this information. They get this information from somewhere else, releasing them notice to the operators. So you should not be able to have custody and operate the system at the same time. And data control operators are people who are data controlled work in the database. They should not have access to the computer program. They should not control the computer program. They have access to the data, but not the programs themselves. Therefore, because they are also operators, I would eliminate A. B, the chief computer operator. Again, the word operator tells you this individual is using the information, is utilizing the information. Remember, we have this arc, authorization, record, and custody. Here, they are recording the transaction. Those are the operators. And what we're looking at is people who have access to the information that releases it. Well, it cannot be the operators. That's out as well. Is it the librarian? Well, let's think about it. What's the role of the librarian? The role of the librarian is the custody. They keep track of the programs. They have it protected from unauthorized use, and they only release it to programmers when need be. Same thing with transaction file and other computer records and documentation. So the librarian does this and only release this information as needed. So they keep track if there's any changes to the software. They want to make sure you have we have an approved order. Then they would release the software, will make the changes, go back, they would review everything, make sure everything is correct. C looks like a good candidate, but let's take a look at D as well. The software engineer. What's the job of the software engineer? The software engineer is to write the code. Well, if you let them write the code and have access to it, and anytime they want to, that's a bad idea. That's a bad internal control. Therefore, the software engineers, basically the programmers, should not be responsible for controlling the use of computer programs. They can write it, but they're not in charge of its custody. They should not be given the right to give access to that program, because they can give access themselves and they can make the changes, any changes that they want themselves without any reviews and control. Therefore, the answer to this question is the librarian. What should you do now? You should go to Farhat Lectures and look at additional MCQs. That's going to help you understand general controls as well as application controls much, much better. Invest in yourself. Good luck. Study hard. And of course, stay